Can Gen Z save us? Not woke, targeted. How does religion start? If only a single person practices a set of rituals to support a belief, is it still a religion? Why are some religions more appealing to masses of people than others? How many practitioners of modern religions have directly witnessed the actions of those they worship, or do they accept as evidence the testimony of previous practitioners and religious leaders? How many beliefs are based on faith rather than evidence? Is religion only a religion if it is limited to the worship of a deity or deities? When does something become a cult? Acceptance by the group is a basic human survival instinct. There is safety in numbers. Those who do not share your best interests understand this need well. They like groupthink. It makes it easier to get their message out. In advertising, it is known as the bandwagon appeal, the idea that by making people believe that a product or idea is popular, you can persuade them to take a desired action. You too can fit in. Come on, everyone is doing it. If you have no direct experience with something, then any position you take related to that thing is most likely based on the testimony of others. Whether you choose to accept this testimony is a matter of trust and faith. It is easy to trust if the message is pure, like thou shalt not steal. It is easy to have faith in a leader that has demonstrated sound morals and ethics. But if the message comes from a proven deceiver, known to serve its own best interests, is it a good idea to have trust and faith? Are your institution's leaders honest, or do they lie and obfuscate? Those who do not share your best interests play the long game. For the success of their plans, they require the right conditions. They learned long ago that if you take something by force, there is likely to be resistance and reprisal. To address this problem, they found that it was easier to convince the masses that actions taken were in their best interests. But there are always a pesky few that ask questions. If too many start to question the narrative, then success becomes in doubt. If you were told you had to give up your freedom of choice, wealth, thought, and movement with no gain to you, you would not readily concede. But if a serious problem was presented, and the only solution involved the sacrifice of these rights, you may be more likely to give in. Problem, reaction, solution. It's simple, and it works. But it is critical to have a receptive audience, and that's where we need to get down to brass tacks. A generation is commonly considered to span between 15 and 20 years, not a particularly long time period in a historical sense. Each new generation inherits values and knowledge from its predecessors, but also assimilates new attributes through experiences that help to make it unique. The introduction of faster and more widespread media technology has greatly changed the way that newer generations receive and consider the information that they acquire. This is the tool that was used by those who do not share your best interests to make a step change in generational thought. They have also leveraged the human flaws of avarice and ego to make their audience more receptive. By telling you that you are smarter, better educated, more socially conscious, and victimized by the lack of foresight of previous generations, they have isolated a specific group and made them more receptive to their message. That the individual is an antiquated concept and that this individuality has led us all toward calamity. That group is commonly referred to as the Millennial Generation. This didn't happen by accident. This group was targeted. It took many years of planning to get the right conditions. Economic changes required parents to place their children in industrialized daycare where early influence could be used to shape thinking. Institutions of learning had to be subverted to change the educational model. Technology had to be put in place to deliver the propaganda, modify behavior, and rewrite history. A culture of victimhood had to be instilled. Merit had to be replaced with the ambiguous concept of equity. Opportunity had to be curtailed to instill a sense of futility, softening the resistance to a change in political philosophy. Finally, blame had to be laid somewhere else, namely with previous generations. Don't believe me? Okay, boomer. But while laying the psychological foundation, those who do not share your best interests also had to create a problem. This problem had to be structured to ensure that it was all-encompassing. No one could escape its reach. It had to be the result of the sins of the previous groups, framed to further isolate millennials. They were told its solution would require the effort of the entirety of mankind and also mandate massive changes and sacrifice in social, economic, and political structures. It was to become an unquestionable existential threat, that life itself would not survive unless a solution was found. Its truth had to become religion, but not a religion based on the mystical ambiguity of faith and testimony. It had to be indisputable because it was based on science. Originally marketed under a variety of names, that problem has come to be known as climate change. Like almost all religions, this too had its heretics. Those who pointed out the obvious political conveniences for the ruling class, the glaring holes in the data, the repeated predictions of doom that never came to pass. But like most religions, these claims fell on the deaf ears of an audience predisposed to hold a specific doctrine. Around this core issue, additional social and economic problems were manufactured. Divide and conquer techniques were employed to separate people by race, economic class, and gender, all seeming to support the idea that the previous philosophies of merit, individual achievement, and personal freedom were failures. The only solution, you were told, would be a massive secession of individual rights and freedoms and the abandonment of the previous philosophies that led you to this precipice. The stage was set. It was now easy for those who do not share your best interests to modify the political structures. They watched the chaos and infighting, all while experiencing an unprecedented increase in the concentration of wealth and power at the top. Consider for a moment that these are the same individuals who profited and gained power through the exploitation of the resources they now want to curtail. But the brainwashing is complete, and no amount of contrary fact or observable data will change the thinking. For millennials, climate change is religion. Its truth cannot be questioned or disputed, and it leads to the next step: compliance. Whether through the limiting of access to goods and services, the restrictions placed on the masses via carbon credits, or massive tax burdens and limited personal rights of property ownership, the elites will gain more control. Only a fool would believe that this will change things for the better. This generation is not woke, it's targeted. They are victims, but it's not in the way they think. Their growth has been stunted. All of the traditional responsibilities of adulthood come late, if at all. Finances, home ownership, raising children, just to name a few. Social engineering keeps them in a state of prolonged childhood, and this lack of experience limits their vision and critical thinking. It's much easier to advocate for more tax when you pay little to none. If you don't own property, then no one else should either, right? You may not have kids, but surely your opinion on how to raise them should be taken into consideration. If there is to be hope for the generation, they must stop being woke and wake up. The first step toward making a change is to accept the reality of the situation and take responsibility. You cannot be blamed for being a target, but you can be held responsible if you do not take steps to mitigate the problem. All hope rests with Gen Z. As millennials approach their 40s, it will take almost all of their efforts to fix themselves, let alone repair the damage done to the human condition. As the elite concentrate more power and wealth at the top, life will only become more difficult for the masses. Continued economic decay, conflict, and authoritarianism will lead to a steady decline in the quality of life. Using their methods of propaganda, the elite will frame the problem as a result of climate, social, and economic challenges and present major social change as the only answer to fix these problems. But it is a red herring. Concentrating more control, wealth, and power at the top will never fix anything for the common person, and anyone with a modicum of logical reasoning left should be able to easily understand that fact. People who seek power and control will never readily give it up. And so it is up to the next generation. Millennials were led down a philosophical path where they were told hope and change would result in a better world, and all it required was their trust and faith. This would be a world where all of the legacy problems of society would be solved by making things more equitable and fair. A world that could only be improved by the sacrifice of the masses to combat global problems. But Gen Z is in a position to see the results of actions taken by the elites. They have watched the decay of values, the decrease in opportunity, the conflict created between the races and genders, the increase of wealth consolidation at the top, and the effects of a social agenda built on promises of peace and harmony that resulted in anything but. This has instilled a cynicism in Gen Z, and that is exactly the feeling that gives hope of true change. Gen Z feels jaded and alienated, and that is a good thing. The true difficulty will be channeling the cynicism and anger into action. That action is the need for true change. Not surrendering to the false promises of improvement from deceptive political prophets who only serve their wealthy benefactors. Not the siren songs from climate alarmists that are attempting to centralize and concentrate more control over the planet. True change starts with personal responsibility and accountability. If this life were a card game and you were dealt a bad hand, it would be easy to fold and give up. But what would that leave you with? You have to use the cards you were dealt and play your way out. Own your life, own your finances, your relationships, and your work ethic. Don't blame someone else for your circumstances, because even if true, how does it help solve your problems? Do not give those who do not share your best interests more wealth and power. Do not support those who believe change will come through that mechanism. Create your datums and measure the results. The purpose of a leader is to help organize a group and keep focus on defined interests and goals, not to serve themselves. You don't need more Obamas or Trumps. You need mayors and councilmen who will bring control to the local level where you can have more active control. You need to decentralize power. You need to remove the concentration of wealth from the top echelons of government because humans are corruptible. If there is no profit or power for those who do not share your best interests, then they will lose their ability to control. Gen Z, you've been dealt a bad hand, but you've seen their cards. Do not fall for their bluff. The solution is simple, but the implementation is the greatest challenge currently facing humanity. Bring control back to the people. Step up, reach inside, and find your strength, courage, humility, and love. True happiness comes from the freedom to explore, to learn, risk, fail, and prosper, not through handouts with prescribed templates of how things should be. The baton has been passed, and it's yours to run with. Your time has come.